Hello. I'm going to be going through the review for the quiz on 3.1 through 3.3. I'm going to show some different methods, not that you have to choose these methods for these problems, just so you can see a couple different ways that you can work out these problems. So for number 1, notice how one of the equations, the y is by itself, and the other one is in standard form. So for number 1, I would probably choose, if I were working out this problem, using the substitution method. So I'm going to go through and use the substitution method. So notice for the substitution method, if we label our two equations, equation 1, the y is already by itself, so y equals negative 2x plus 5, so I'm going to substitute that into this second equation right where the y is. So if I rewrite that, it's going to be x minus, and then my y value is negative 2x plus 5, and then that equals 1. Then notice I wrote the equation the exact same, x and then minus, but what this y equals, I just substituted that inside parentheses, equals in the 1. Now I have one equation with just one variable, so I'm going to go through and solve for my x. And if you want to squeeze in a 1 here, you can distribute that negative 1. So I have x plus 2x minus 5 equals 1. So I'm going to keep combining my like terms. So 1x plus 2x is 3x minus 5 equals 1. So add the 5 over. I get 3x equals 6. So then I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I get x equals 6 divided by 3, or just 2. Now, if you remember, when we have these equal signs, our answers are going to be coordinates. So we still need to find the y values. So then what I'm going to do, I can plug this x equals 2 back into this first equation or this second equation, whichever one looks easier. So if I plug it back into this first equation, I get y equals negative 2 times my x, which is positive 2, plus my 5. And then I'm going to do order of operations to simplify that down. So I get negative 4 plus the 5 equals 1. So y then equals 1. So my answer is then going to be a coordinate positive 2, positive 1. Now, if I plug those back into this equation, and for the 2 and for my x, the 1 for my y, and I simplify both sides, it should reduce down to the same. And it should also work for this second one also. Now, this second one, I'm going to choose a different method. So we use substitution method for this first one. So this second one, I'm going to try the elimination method. Now, if I'm going to use the elimination method, I need to get my like terms lined up. So notice this first equation is in standard form. So I'm going to get this second one in standard form. So I'm going to minus this 2x over. So then if I rewrite it, it's negative 2x plus y. Those aren't like terms, so I just put them next to each other, equals 6. Now this first one, I'm just going to rewrite that. Not changing anything with that first equation, just rewriting it. So then notice my like terms are lined up, so that's good. So then from here, I'm going to make a big addition problem, and I'm going to use that elimination method. And the nice thing about this problem, these x's, they already cancel out. So positive 2 plus a negative 2x just cancels. They're opposites. Then 1y plus 3y is 4y equals 16. So then I keep solving for my y. So I get y equals 4. Okay, then from here, I can plug that back into either of the equation, and I'm going to solve for my x, so whichever one looks easier. So if I plug it back into that first equation, I have 2x plus my y, which is 4, equals 10. And then I just get the x by itself. So then I subtract the 4, 2x equals 6, divide by the 2, and I get x equals 3. So notice I have the x and the y solved for. So my answer then is going to be a coordinate. My x is 3, and my y value is 4. Okay. Alrighty, now this next problem, I haven't done the graphing method, so I'm going to choose to do this next one using the graphing method. And again, you can choose different methods than what I'm choosing. I just want to show a little bit about each method to refresh on them. So this first one, the y is already by itself, so it says y equals x. So I don't have to do anything with that one. Now, if I get some graph paper, and I want to graph this one, Notice the y-intercept, there is none, so I can put a +0 at the end, so it crosses through 0, 0. The slope is the number out in front. There's no number out in front, so it would just be 1. So I'm going up 1 over 1. Or I can go down 1, back 1. So I get that straight line. And then from here, for this second one, it's in standard form, so I can either do the cover-up method or I can just get that y by itself. So if I do the cover-up method, I cover up my y, I get x equals 0. If I cover up my x, then I get negative 4y equals 0, which solve for it, and I get y equals 0. So notice my x and my y-intercepts is 0. So doing the cover-up method really didn't help me get a second point because the x-axis and the y-axis, it crosses at 0. So for this one, I'm going to have to actually get the y by itself. So let me go back and try that. So if I add this 4y over, those cancel out. I get x equals 4y, then divide by 4. Those cancel out. I get y equals, the 4 is in the denominator, so I get 1/4 x. Okay, I need to keep that 4 in the denominator. So my y-intercept again is still 0, but my slope is 1/4. So think rise over run. So up 1 over 4, up 1 over 4, or I can go down 1, back 4, down 1, back 4. And I get this other line. So then you'll notice my solution is where do they cross? So they cross right at 0, 0. So that is going to be my solution. Okay. We've done one now using the graphing method. You can graph by hand or the graphing calculator. We've done one using the substitution one and one using the elimination method. So these last two in this section, I'm just going to choose which method I would choose on them. So for this first one, it's in standard form. Whenever it's in standard form, I choose the elimination method. So I make a big addition problem. These cancel out. So I have 1y plus 2y is 3y equals 0 plus 30 is 30. So divide by 3, I get y equals 10. And then I'm going to substitute that back into equation 1 or equation 2. So I'm going to use equation 1. So I have 5x plus my y equals 10 equals 0. And then I just solve for my x value. So I have 5x equals, I'm going to subtract the 10 over, so minus 10. Divide both sides by 5, so I get x equals negative 10 divided by 5, which is negative 2. So then I have my x and my y value, so my answer is negative 2, positive 10. The next one, it's kind of in standard form. We would have to move this 11 over. So I can either choose to do that method or I could graph it. With this 11, it might have larger numbers that maybe it won't fit on your graph, but let's maybe choose to use the graphing calculator in this one. We haven't done that yet. So let's get our y's by itself. So on this first one, I'm going to subtract the 2x over. So I'd have y minus 11 equals then minus the 2x minus 2x, so negative 2x. And then I still need to get this y by itself, so plus 11. So then I get y equals negative 2x plus 11. So that's my first one. And then this next one, I need to get this y by itself. So I'm minus the 3x. So I'm negative y equals negative 3x minus 1. And then I'm going to divide by the negative 1. Those cancel out. So I get y equals positive 3x plus 1. The negative divided by negative changes it to positive 3. Negative divided by negative makes it a positive 1. So then I have my two equations. I'm going to grab my graphing calculator. Okay, I'm going to clear what's in there, and then I'm going to type in negative 2x plus 11, and then I'm going to type in 3x plus 1. So make sure the X button is right here. So we type them in. It doesn't matter the order in which you type them in, and then you're going to click graph. And you'll notice it crosses right here, so that is our solution, and we want to find that, so we're going to click the second button and then trace, and then we're going to go down to where it says 5, or just click 5, which is intersect, click enter, click enter, click enter, and then it will come up with intersection. So then 2, 7 is your solution. So then you're just going to write 2, 7 for your answer. Okay. Make sure if you are using the graphing calculator that you have to get the y's by itself in order to plug it into the graphing calculator. Alrighty. The next problem is inequalities. So for these inequalities, you can use the graphing calculator or you can graph it by hand, but you do need to graph them because of the inequality. We're going to have to do dotted or solid line and then our shading. So for the first one, I'm going to get the y by itself on it. So subtract 2x on both sides. So we have negative 3y is less than negative 2x plus 9. Divide both sides by negative 3. I'm dividing by a negative, so I need to switch the direction of the inequality. Then I get a positive 2/3 x minus 3. So that is my first one that I'm going to graph. So I'm going to go to my graph paper. I'm going to go to negative 3. And then my slope is 2/3. So up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. Or I can go down 2, back 3. Okay. And then notice there's no bar underneath of it, so it's a dotted line. Okay, and then it is y is greater than that, so I'm shading everything above it. Okay. And then I go to my next one. I need to get my y by itself, or I can do the cover-up method. So I get y is greater than negative x minus 2. So then go back to my graph paper. It goes through negative 2, so I make that point. And then my slope is negative 1, so down 1 over 1. Or I can go up 1, back 1. And then from here, this one is greater than, there's no bar underneath of it, so it's still a dotted line. And then I need to shade greater than that. So if I'm looking at this y-axis at negative 2, the numbers get greater than above it. So I'm shading everything to the right of it. And where my solution is going to be is where they overlap. So notice right here in this middle part is where my shading overlaps. So that is every point in that overlap is a solution. And I'm not going to label them. There's way too many to label. So then number 7. I need to go ahead and graph that one. So for the first one, we've got to get the y by itself. So add the x. We have negative y is greater than or equal to x plus 1. Divide by negative 1. I'm dividing by a negative, so I switch the direction of the inequality. So then I get a negative x minus 1. So I'm going to go down to negative 1 as my y-intercept. My slope is negative 1, so down 1 over 1. Negative slope should be a decreasing line, so always check that. Positive slope should be increasing. And then it has a bar underneath of it, so I need a solid line. And then it is y is less than that. So notice it crosses at negative 1. It gets less than below. So I'm shading everything below. And then I go to the next one. And the y is already by itself. There's absolute value bars, so I know it's going to be a V shape. This minus 3 means it goes to the right 3. And then this minus 1 goes down 1. So I need to start at 0, 0. I need to go to the right 3. And then down 1. I need to make that vertex. And then my slope is out front in the A slot, so that's negative 1. So I'm going down 1 over 1. And then I need to reflect that over on my vertex to get it going the other way to make that V shape. It's a solid line that I need to make. and then it is y is less than that, so I'm shading everything below it. If it was y is greater than, I'm shading everything above it. So I need to shade everything below it. So you'll notice the overlap is going to be this part right here. Okay. I apologize, my classroom lights, I wasn't making enough motion, so they turned off on me. Let me real quickly get it going again. Alrighty. For number 8, we're going to talk about just setting up the equations, and then from there you can pick and choose which method you want to use to solve for it. So it says Pump Up Gym has an initial joining fee of $205 and a monthly membership of $15. The Universe Gym has an initial joining fee of $125 and a monthly membership of $19. So each gym is going to be a separate equation. So to start off with, the first gym, notice how it was $205 automatically to join them, and then an additional $15 per month. So then we're going to have $15 per month. We don't know how many months we're going to go there, and then plus that flat initial fee of $205. Now the next gym, it's going to be $19 per month, but then the joining fee is $125. Okay, so our X value is going to be the number of months, and then our Y value is going to be the total cost. So for part A, it says, when will the cost to join and maintain the membership at the gyms be equal? So you're going to look to see where do they cross at, and you want to find the solution. So you can do that by substitution, elimination, or graphing. And then for the next one, if you planned on continuing your gym membership for only 2 years, which gym would you choose to join? So notice X is the number of months. So if we're joining for 2 years, that's 24 months. So we would plug in 24 for X's and then simplify both of them and see which one's cheaper. The next one for number 9, write and solve a system of 2 inequalities by graphing. So that's just going to be like number 6 and 7. We're solving a system of inequalities right there. And then lastly, number 10, they want us to know which is the correct graph. We turned in graph A, our friend turned in graph B. So we need to see if it's supposed to be parallel lines or was it the same line. So I would recommend just getting the y's by itself, see if they're parallel or if they're the same line. So if we do that, we divide by our 3, we get y equals 2x minus 4. Then we do the same thing for the second equation. We divide by our negative 5. We get y equals positive 2x and then a positive 4. Okay, notice the slopes are the same and the y-intercepts are different, so then they're going to be parallel lines. So if we look, then graph A has to be the correct graph, that they should be parallel lines.